What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with Tesla stock, what you should be watching for moving forward. I'm also going to talk about the overall market, how this may affect Tesla, and some very important levels to watch for, and also what's going on with some very big news that just dropped. I'm going to talk about some news affecting Tesla, what's going on with earnings and the FOMC meeting, and what you should be watching for Tesla SPY and the QQQ, and also for Nvda. But before I do anything like that, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just 7 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so looking at Tesla's things down about 1.4%, or at least it was down that much for yesterday's session, and now it's down about another almost 0.9% in the pre-market. So once again, Tesla's looking quite red, very, very weak after we had some bearish news that came out. But the question is, how will Tesla move going forward, and what should we be expecting? Now, before I talk about that, let's talk about the market, what's going on. Just as a reminder, we have new home sales coming out 30 minutes after the market opens, but that's not going to be significant in my eyes. I don't think it's going to affect the market much. But what will affect the market is the next big piece of data. The biggest thing coming out will be the interest rate hike decision at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. For New York time, it's going to be 2 p.m., so make sure you're ready for this. Then we have the press conference at 2:30 p.m. when Jerome Powell starts speaking. Okay, those are two separate things. Make sure you're ready for them. And we're going to see a big surge in volatility for this. Now, for the first hour or so, maybe first 30 to 45 minutes especially, we might see some volatility in the markets, but then after that, I'm expecting it to get very, very boring, very sideways, not really much to happen. And then I think that once we're just going to be waiting for the rate hike decision, basically, it's going to be very boring after the first hour. Market's just going to trade sideways. Then the decision comes out. We're going to see a big reaction from there, and then the volatility will go crazy once Jerome Powell starts speaking. All right, so that's my view for the market in a nutshell. But now let's talk about how the market can move for the first hour or so. Looking at earnings so far that just came out this morning, basically Coca-Cola is up 1.7%. Raising its annual revenue forecast, strong guidance. Snap is down 17.5%. Once again, they had weaker than expected third quarter guidance. AT&T is up 2%, beating estimates once again, and they are working to lower costs, which is very good for them. Wells Fargo is up 2.5%. They authorized a new buyback, which is awesome. Amazon fell 1.6%, but they didn't have anything like that. They just basically have a lawsuit against them that just came out. Besides that, we have other companies that are up. Deutsche Bank is up 1.7%. Once again, some pretty decent stuff so far. But if you look at their future earnings, they do have some strong guidance, which is why they're still up despite setbacks. Now, as far as earnings go, just as a reminder, we had AT&T, Coca-Cola, and et cetera just came out. I just talked about those. For after the market closes, we have Meta, Chipotle, just a couple of others like eBay for the retail side. So we do have some big earnings coming out by the time the market closes. So make sure you're ready for that. And besides that, now let's talk about how things went for yesterday. So going up, we have the Fed day today. Don't forget that. We have the FOMC meeting. It's going to be very important. When it comes to Google, they did relatively well. They had stronger than expected earnings, lots of strength for their cloud business, and we're expected to see, once again, more strength in the cloud sector. Very, very good for them. UPS has reached a deal, which is decent for them, despite the fact that, all the things that were going on. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but that did lead to some downside for them. There are some improvements being made, so we'll see how that affects them. And then Microsoft, unfortunately, their outlook did disappoint, but that was really all that was negative. Pretty much everything was positive for them based off what I was seeing. So what I mean by that is they beat profit and revenue. They beat EPS. They beat on so many expectations. Their current earnings were strong, right? The only issue, or one of the only things that caused investors to sell this stock, was the fact that they said that their AI revenue is not going to necessarily have a bigger impact until the second half of the fiscal year that just started. So they're saying it's going to take a little bit longer than expected by the time they get a nice amount of revenue from their AI services. Basically, they're saying that, hey, we're going to make money, but it's going to take a little bit longer than expected. That's all it was. And besides that, everything else is pretty much good for them. From what I saw, the large majority of their revenue projections and etc. were quite good, quite good. And despite that, if the outlook has something that these institutions don't really like and the news goes negative about it, it could still sell off despite how strong everything was, beating on EPS and revenue. And I was expecting that, right? That's what I told you guys earlier. I was pretty confident they would do well. It's just that the outlook was not as strong as expected, and it is what it is. Sometimes things like that happen. Now, for Tesla, they've initiated a recall of about 1,300 cars for the Model S, X, and Ys over some misaligned front cameras. This news actually came out yesterday, a little bit later, but if anything, it's worth noting because this is very important for Tesla and this will affect them. This is part of why Tesla's underperforming. There's also some more news about the downgrades from UBS that's still making some headlines. And this is once again important stuff because with recalls once again happening again, even though it's only for about 1,300 cars, this is still making so many headlines. The media is going to scream, it's a recall, Tesla's this and that. And would you look at that? Now Tesla's selling off thanks to it. So nothing new, nothing out of the ordinary. This is just the same manipulation and same things that go on. But now let's break down Tesla. What are some levels to watch for? So Tesla's currently at about 263 a share. All right. If Tesla bounces off this 262.5 zone, you're going to be watching 265 as resistance, 266, and then 268, followed by 270. I don't really think it's going to go up to 270, though. I'm just calling out that level. And then for support, you're going to be watching 260, 262.5 first, and then we have 260, 257, and then 255, followed by 253. Now, what do I think is more likely to happen to Tesla? I think it's going to try to base around here, trying to get a tiny little bounce to retest to like 265 and trade sideways. Then we may see it slow down a little bit more and get down to the very lower, like 260s or so. Then eventually it's just going to trade sideways and very flat and just be very boring for a couple of hours approaching the FOMC meeting. And then after that, I don't know what's going to happen after that. It all depends on the rate hike decision. The Fed is most likely going to give us a 25 basis point rate hike, so we'll see what happens to the market then. And then we'll have to wait and see what happens to other stocks out there. Now, could you argue that Tesla has the potential like falling wedge developing? You could argue that, but just to be safe, technicals alone are not everything. It's going to depend on what Jerome Powell says. I can't really predict that, and technicals alone are not going to like give us the best amount of like insights on that, but always be prepared just to be safe. Now, for SPY, you're going to be watching support at 454, 453.5 below that, and resistance around this 455 zone all the way up here, followed by around 455.75 and then 456. What do I think is more likely? Well, it's looking like it could be forming or retesting this bottom down here around this like just below 454 area, so very close to that. 454 should be tested. Then a nice bounce. Can be looking for a bounce on SPY. Then once again for this thing to fall back down and just start trading sideways after that. And then we're going to see a big reaction depending on what happens with Jerome Powell. If anything, it is looking a little bit more bearish on the 30-minute time frame, so just be very careful for now. But all of this could change depending on the FOMC meeting, so always be open-minded and expect some boring price action approaching it. I think Apple's going to be basically range bound between 192 to 194, being very, very boring today. The QQQ, same thing basically. I think this thing is going to be continuing to test 377.5. If that fails us, watch 376, that entire zone. And if that fails us, if 376.75 fails us, watch 375.8, then 375 flats, followed by 374. But if it does try to bounce, you're going to be watching 378, 379, 380 as our resistances. I know that it's pretty funny how I'm just calling out every dollar level, but that's how it's looking for now. And at 378.33 to be more like precise, if anything. But I'm going to be looking for a small bounce in the open and a bit of a drop in lots of sideways price action approaching Jerome Powell. Once the rate hike decision comes out, then we're going to see a much bigger move. But I do expect some volatility in the morning for it, so we'll see which way it goes. So watch these levels carefully. Earnings were very mixed. I mean, Microsoft was really the only like really big one that fell. Besides that, Snap was also down quite a bit. Just those two basically, and then most earnings that came out today and also for Google were quite good. So it's very mixed so far, but the market's still selling off, at least approaching it, and also approaching the FOMC meeting. Sometimes that happens too. Now for Nvidia, the thing about Nvidia is it looks really bullish from a technical standpoint. Just based off technicals, let's ignore FOMC. This looks bullish, very, very bullish to me. We have a nice inverse head and shoulder structure. It's still forming this nice cup and handle. There's a nice accumulation that formed right over here, and it looks like it's going to fly all the way up to about 480. However, let's not be too fixated on levels like that. Let's just be more focused on what happens with the FOMC meeting because that could affect how Nvidia moves. So once again, if we could get through the FOMC meeting without tanking, then this thing is going to most likely explode and pump all the way up to about 480 in my opinion. But it depends on the FOMC. That's going to affect it too. So make sure you're open-minded and prepared for that as well. All right, so that's my view of it. You're going to be watching these levels on the video carefully, and I want to keep this video kind of short. So thank you all for listening. Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you guys very soon. Tesla in the market to the moon, as the long term is very bright, and peace out.